It is a sentence from which there is no escape and no return.
Nowhere left to hide for one of the FBI's most wanted drug lords. Not even the mountains of his native Sinaloa state in Mexico.
Colombia's most wanted drug lord captured. After more than a decade on the run, this fugitive didn't seem fazed by the cameras.
We know that drug lords are some of the most despicable people in our society. They care about money and power, and it doesn't matter to them who they hurt in the process of trying to get it. Many notorious drug lords have wiped out hundreds of people while in their reign of terror. They can be very difficult to catch, even with the most trained professionals tracking their every move. But when they are captured, it's typically not very pretty. Stay tuned to learn just how some of the most sadistic drug lords were brought down from power and captured. Dario Antonio Usaga, who went by the name of Otoniel, was born in northwestern Colombia in 1971 to a modest family. He would go on to become one of the most infamous drug traffickers in the world. He was the powerful leader of a drug trafficking group known as the Gulf Clan. He was responsible for bringing countless amounts of drugs into the United States. He was a ruthless leader who brutally killed many innocent people, including women and young children. He often recruited minors and forced them to serve for him. He would often abuse and manipulate them to keep them in his service. If they dared to defy him, they would likely end up dead. The search for this drug king began in 2011 by the Colombian government, but he was not easy to find, and as the years passed, he remained at large. Many were desperate for his capture, and the pressure was mounting against the Colombian government to do more to bring him down. By the year 2015, it was reported that more than 1,000 anti-drug officers were working to find Otoniel and bring him into custody. The search was not without its casualties. Also in 2015, there was a helicopter that was being used in the search. It ended up crashing and killing 18 people. By the year 2017, the United States government put up a reward of $5 million for the successful capture of this criminal. But it wasn't until 2021 that his capture would actually occur. The Colombian government received information about where Otoniel was hiding out. He was stationed in the northwest region of the state near the Panama border. His location was discovered by tracking members of the drug cartel who were traveling to and from the hideout to bring him medication for a kidney disease. On October 22, 2021, the mission to take him down was conducted. It was an incredibly challenging and meticulous process that involved blocking off any possible escape routes, such as roads and rivers. It was a very remote and mountainous area, which made the process all the more complicated. But this time, Otoniel could not manage to escape.
Colombia's most wanted drug lord captured. After more than a decade on the run, this fugitive didn't seem fazed by the cameras. The kingpin, known as Otoniel, smirking after being arrested in his jungle hideout.
After all the work it took to bring this man down, those involved certainly were not about to miss an opportunity to snap some pictures to commemorate the occasion.
Some special forces officers took selfies as they seized the drugs baron.
There is no minimizing just how big of a deal this capture means to multiple different countries. The damage this drug lord created was so massive.
Otoniel is accused of sending dozens of shipments of cocaine to the United States as he built a ruthless drugs empire, rising to become the leader of the gang known as Gulf Clan.
Even though this capture was certainly worth it, it's only a matter of time until someone will one day take this drug kingpin's place.
While the Colombian government have been bullish about the arrest of a drugs baron, they have been warned by experts, while one kingpin falls, another always rises.
Following the drug kingpin's capture, he was extradited to the United States, who were eager to bring him to justice after the pain he caused. Watch the entourage that surrounded him as he arrived. He didn't appear fearful, and at times appeared to even be smirking at those near him.
He was the most wanted man in Colombia until his arrest in October. Now, wearing protective military gear, Dario Antonio Usaga, also known as Otoniel, has been flown to the United States, charged with drug trafficking.
Colombian President Iván Duque Marquez even announced the successful extradition of the drug kingpin.
Otoniel was extradited. This criminal is comparable only to Pablo Escobar, killer of social leaders, abuser of children, boys, girls and teenagers alike, killer of police officers, and one of the most dangerous criminals in the world.
The drug lord's extradition to the United States almost didn't happen after pushback from his legal team. It's no surprise that he would rather remain in Colombian custody custody instead of being sent to the United States, where he will certainly be kept in much stricter conditions and under closer investigation.
Otoniel's lawyer argued against his extradition, saying he should be allowed to confess his role in Colombia's nearly 6 decades of internal conflict. But that request was denied.
Otoniel pleaded guilty to drug trafficking in 2022. He learned his sentence in the summer of 2023. He will spend the next 45 years of his life behind bars and will die in prison. While many Americans celebrated the sentence, some Colombians believe that he should have been sentenced in Colombia.
Sé y soy consciente que las víctimas están en Colombia, no en Estados Unidos. Sí, sabemos que Estados Unidos lo pide por droga, por otros hechos, pero no por nuestras víctimas, nuestros muertos cuando hemos llorado.
Many believe that the Colombian government deserved to decide what sort of punishment this criminal would receive on behalf of the victims living there.
Ahora, si Otoniel cometió delito en Estados Unidos, España, Europa, llámese donde ella sea, después que pague aquí, que lo jalen allá. Pero lo que cometió aquí no puede pagar en Estados Unidos.
So what does this mean for the landscape of the drug world moving forward? One professional gave his opinion.
By no means is it the end of it, nor is it the end of the war on drugs as we know it. The president said this is the most important killing since the death of Pablo Escobar, which didn't bring down drug trafficking. Instead, it diversified drug trafficking from Pablo Escobar to lower kingpins down the road. And that's exactly what's going to happen in this case.
El Chapo, born Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman, is likely one of the most infamous drug kingpins of all time. He was born in Sinola, Mexico in 1957 to a low-income farming family. When you consider his humble beginnings, it's hard to imagine how he became the ruthless and powerful killer that would someday run the Sinaloa drug cartel. El Chapo got involved in drug trafficking at a young age, and it wasn't long until he was overseeing the whole operation. It wasn't just one type of drug that he would help to smuggle, but many. These drugs would be shipped throughout both Europe and the United States. El Chapo knew every detail in connection to the ins and outs of the drug trade. He utilized everything from secret tunnels to boats to transport drugs. It was through this knowledge that he managed to ship more drugs than any drug kingpin in history.
He smuggled drugs any way he could, inside cans of jalapenos, fake bananas, by boat, even submarine.
Both Mexico and the United States knew that this was a serious problem, but it wasn't going to be easy to take him down. El Chapo was worth billions and had many powerful men around him. El Chapo was arrested for the first time in 1993 and sentenced to 21 years behind bars, but this was only the beginning. Terrified of being extradited to the United States, where he would face harsher conditions, he managed to escape by 2001. The years went on and there was still no sign of El Chapo. The United States and Mexico began to work together to try to locate him. Finally, in 2014, they received information that he was staying in a condominium building in Mazatlan. Fully armed, law enforcement surrounded the area and burst into the room where he was staying. Greatly outnumbered, he had no choice but to surrender. He was then taken into custody. Both nations were very proud of this victory.
So getting him was a big deal for you.
Absolutely. In my world, it was like winning the Super Bowl, winning the World Series. This was the actual trophy.
El Chapo was sent to a Mexican prison that was said to be maximum security. However, it would turn out not to be secure enough. A short time later, he managed to escape yet again, this time using a secret tunnel. It's hard to imagine how much work and time went into locking this man away, only for him to escape without a trace. The United States government was particularly displeased to hear of El Chapo's escape because they wanted him to be extradited to the United States. The tunnel led El Chapo to an abandoned house about a mile from the prison, and he would continue his life on the run. A massive manhunt would then begin, lasting from 2015 to 2016, using an incredible amount of resources. A home in northern Sinaloa would soon pop up on law enforcement radar, and it was secretly being watched. The home was believed to be filled with gang members with weapons. It was determined that this was El Chapo's current hiding spot. What would soon follow was the infamous Black Swan Initiative. Officers waited until they saw a vehicle leave the property to grab some food. They then surrounded the property and invaded it. Somehow, yet again, El Chapo managed to escape through a tunnel, but he wouldn't be able to hide for long. A short time later, El Chapo was located in a stolen vehicle. This time, there was nowhere for him to hide. Though he threatened law enforcement by telling them they would all be killed, he was finally taken into custody. El Chapo was not about to make a quick escape again. as he was extradited to the United States, just as he had always feared. Now it was time for him to face justice.
The dramatic moment in a Brooklyn courtroom today. Mexican drug king Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, convicted on all counts. ABC News obtaining this video, El Chapo, and the moment he learned where authorities were taking him, he was actually brought here to the U.S. to face justice.
Surely, this is the last of El Chapo. At least that is what the government claims.
It is a sentence from which there is no escape and no return. This conviction is a victory for the American people who has suffered so long and so much while Guzman made billions pouring poison over our southern border.
But is it really true that El Chapo has no possible means to escape? It seems that if anyone could escape a maximum security prison, this man would be the one to do it. In the summer of 2023, rumors that he might be planning to do it again began to spread, causing reason for concern.
The El Chapo escape fears are not unfounded. He tunneled out of the last Mexican prison where he was locked up and rode to freedom on an underground motorcycle. That was his second escape. Tonight, the I-Team has a letter from El Chapo in which he implies that U.S. prison officials are bullying him because he has escaped before.
So what exactly would it take for El Chapo to escape U.S. custody? Take a look at where he is being held to find out.
Nobody's ever broken out of the Supermax prison here in Colorado since opening in 1994, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This airtight penitentiary has housed the worst of the worst, including billionaire cartel kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Like the rest here, segregated and on permanent lockdown 23 hours a day.
El Chapo wrote a letter to a United States judge in which he claimed that he was being treated unfairly. The drug king, who was being kept on a 24-hour lockdown, said that prison guards were not letting him communicate with his lawyer. He claimed that since he's been imprisoned, he hasn't gotten any paperwork from his lawyer.
They always use the excuse that it's because Guzman fled from a Mexican prison, he writes. This is a ridiculous claim used to justify the anomalies.
While it is impossible to say that he will never manage to escape prison, he certainly has his work cut out for him. Rafael Caro Quintero was born in 1952 in Sinola, Mexico. He was one of 12 children of a farming family. The early years of his life were quite normal, as he helped his family run the farm and take care of the children. But by the time Rafael became a teenager, he was already starting to get involved in a life of crime. He began to sell drugs using his brother's farm as a home base. Before long, he had connections with some of the most famous drug traffickers in the area. Rafael's brother, Miguel Carro Quintero, was also a drug dealer. The two of them worked together, along with other well-known traffickers, to ship huge quantities of drugs to the United States from Mexico. Rafael was a ruthless leader, as all drug kingpins seemed to be, and he wasn't afraid to take out anyone who got in his way. This even included law enforcement. The killings that he dished out were not quick and painless. Rather, they were brutal and often included torture. The first murder he committed was in January of 1985, and the victim was a writer named John Clay Walker and a student named Albert Radalot. These were two U.S. citizens who had been visiting Guadalajara when they happened to stumble into the dining area where Rafael and his gang were. What great offense did they commit, you might be wondering? They accidentally wandered into one of the gang's private parties. Rafael and his men took the two victims into a storage closet, where they brutally tortured them with ice picks and questioned them. It's likely that the gang mistook them as secret agents who were trying to track them down. While John died of a result of the torture, Albert was still alive when both men were wrapped up in tablecloths and disposed of in a nearby park. Their bodies weren't discovered until months later. The drug king's next victim was Enrique Camarena. Kiki was a member of the United States Drug Enforcement Administration. He was working as an undercover agent tracking Rafael and his illegal activity. His goal was to eventually lead law enforcement to the gang. However, he was ultimately discovered and kidnapped. The gang brutally tortured him before killing him. Rafael was arrested in April 1985 in Costa Rica and charged with murder and other crimes. He was sentenced to spend 40 years behind bars. But ultimately, the sentence would fall through years down the line. In August 2013, the unexpected would happen. A court shockingly ordered that Rafael be immediately released, despite only having served 28 years of his sentence. This was because the state ruled that he had been tried improperly years ago. The United States government was outraged to learn of the drug lord's release and filed a petition stating they would be going after him for charges he had committed against the U.S. It was not until 2022 that he was finally captured, with the help of a search dog.
Nowhere left to hide for one of the FBI's most wanted drug lords. Not even the mountains of his native Sinaloa state in Mexico.
The drug lord's arrest came at an interesting time within the political climate, especially as pressure to fight back against the cartel was continuing to mount. It appeared as if part of the urgency behind taking the drug king down now, after all this time, was to help mend the relations between Mexico and the United States.
Quintero's rearrest comes just days after Mexico's president met his American counterpart, claiming progress on tackling illicit narcotics in what has long been a tense matter between the two countries. So proud of its achievement, the Mexican Navy even released a photo of the search dog that found Quintero.
Tragically, taking down Rafael would come at a steep cost.
Authorities say at least 14 people were killed and another seriously injured when a Black Hawk helicopter supporting the operation crashed.
While this is another high-up member of the cartel that has been brought to justice, it is certainly not the end of the drug cartel as we know it. Just as we've seen with Pablo Escobar and other kingpins before him, when you take one down, it's only a matter of time before a new leader comes to power. It's like an endless cycle that's impossible to tackle for good.
The strategy of the DEA and the Mexican security forces has to be to take off these very senior people in the cartels. But when they do, it sort of creates a job opening at the top. It doesn't actually change any of the structural problems which mean that cartels and organized crime are able to flourish.
If there is one thing we can learn from the captures of these notorious drug lords, is that these leaders are plentiful, and that nations must work together to bring down the drug cartel for good. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more.